Now, we've all had the need to call a function quickly and easily. Maybe that's to test some new code, change game modes, or simply try out a new feature in our project. And this often takes the form of some custom code to create a cheat code system or add a custom inspector to add a button. And in fact, I made a video earlier showing one way to create a cheat code tool. And while that tool works on desktop, on mobile, it can quickly get complicated and more cumbersome. So, what if this could always be easy to do in the editor, in a desktop build, and on a mobile build? What if all you needed to do was add a single attribute to that function and you could call that function? Well, that's exactly what Jahro Console lets you do. At its core, it's an easy to implement cheat code system that requires just one attribute and works equally well on mobile as in the Unity editor or a desktop build. Now, before we go any further, I'm proud to say this is the first sponsored video on this channel. I've turned down other products that I didn't think would serve the community very well. Whereas Jahro Console is a tool that I think is worth sharing and can save you a lot of time and effort in the development of your game, especially if you're working on mobile. Now, the words in this video are mine and mine alone. I made it clear to the developer that I'll only share their product if I can support it and if I can give my honest opinion of the product. I'll also share with you and the developers things that I think could or should be better. So with that out of the way, what exactly is Jahro Console? At its core, it's pretty simple and easy to use. As a tool, it generates and organizes buttons on a UI overlay based on the attributes that you add to any static function. These buttons will then call the function that the attribute decorates. This allows easy developer cheat codes and quicker testing of features such as unlocking levels or player upgrades. The buttons will also handle input parameters of basic data types. The overlay itself is easily opened by an on-screen button, a hotkey, or multiple taps when used with a mobile build. There's no extra code for you to create or maintain as your project grows. But even better, the UI is generated by Jahro Console at runtime and doesn't take up space in your hierarchy. But best of all, it's easy to turn on and off when you're ready to publish your project. Your customers won't have access to the buttons or cheat codes, and there's nothing for them to break or misuse. So before we jump into how it works, let's take a closer look at it in action. So to do that, I've put together a simple project in Unity. And if we enter play mode, we can see the launch button, which can be toggled on and off in the settings menu, as well as moved around on the screen by simply dragging it to a new location. We can then click the button, and from there, we can resize the window, toggle between console and visual mode, and move the window around. Once we have the window open, we can test a couple of buttons that I've already created. For example, one of them tests particle effects, and another one might add health to our player. And that's pretty slick, but I think the real winning feature of Jahro Console is how it works on mobile. So let's take a look at that. Here once again, we can see the launch button. If we use the button, or 4 quick taps at the top of the screen, we can open the overlay. You can see the same set of buttons that again can be used to change the game state or maybe reload the level. Other examples of what you might do with these buttons would be adding currency to a player's inventory, maybe upgrading that player in some way, triggering events such as unlocking levels, or maybe some various power-ups, or just testing the functionality of a method. Jahro also has one new feature in the latest release. It now intercepts calls to the Unity console. This means even in mobile, you can easily see messages or errors, making the QA process quicker and easier. The developers have gone even a step further and added a copy and paste button as well as a share button that will allow testers to email a particular error or message directly from within the mobile build. Okay, so you're sitting there thinking, all right, I can already do this on my own. I can figure out a way to work around this. And yes, there are ways to create a similar solution and save a few dollars. Now, one of those ways is to follow my video on cheat codes, but that won't work on mobile and requires more work per cheat code implemented. Not to mention that it requires you to remember all the codes that you've created. That's great for Easter eggs for your players, but not so awesome for developers. You could also create a custom hidden panel that pops out, and that would work on mobile as well as desktop. Then you have to add buttons and connect the buttons to the function for each cheat code. And there's no way to use input parameters without fully designing a UI for each cheat code. And I say no thanks. Jahro is a more sustainable solution, especially for mobile. So let's dive into how to actually use the Jahro console. The first thing we need to do if we want to add it to a script is simply add the namespace Jahro console to the script. We can then add the attribute Jahro command to any static function. Now you'll notice that the attribute has 3 overloads, each with one additional string input parameter. The first input parameter is the name of the command and will be the text that shows on the button in the overlay. The second is a description of what will happen, which can be helpful for longer-term projects or larger teams. The third and final parameter is a group name that is used to help organize the buttons in the UI overlay. Jahro also has a settings menu that, while simple, has some crucial features. In the settings menu, you can disable Jahro completely and not have it as part of your build. You can also toggle on and off the launch button, enable shortcuts, enable or disable the tap area on mobile, or you can also select the assemblies that have Jahro commands, and this is presumably to speed up Jahro's processing and search for those commands. While I think Jahro Console is good and very useful tool, it's not perfect, and so I have a few issues, and I brought these all up with the developer, and they've promised me that this is either going to be fixed in the next release or shortly afterwards. The console mode is where you have text entry of commands rather than pressing buttons. It's worth knowing that if the names have spaces between the words, this console mode won't work. It's also case sensitive, which again makes sense, but it's worth knowing when you're naming your commands. There's also no way to change the default size or scale of the Jahro overlay. By default, it covers the entire game view, which makes sense for mobile, but isn't awesome for desktop or the editor. Also, if you resize it, close it, and reopen it, it doesn't remember that size, which the developers have told me is just an error and will definitely get fixed in the next build. I've also found the default text size, while perfect for mobile, it's a bit too big for a desktop environment and should be scalable. In the documentations, it's not super clear that the functions that are decorated with the Jahro command attribute must be static. Now, while this makes sense, it's something worth being aware of, that when you're creating your code, you may have to get creative to work around this so you can call a non-static function from a static function. Now, I've shared these thoughts with the developer, and they promised me that these are going to get addressed, either in the next release or shortly after that. So at the end of the day, I think the time saved by using Jahro Console easily makes up for the purchase price. If you think about it, how many hours would it take to recreate this functionality, especially if you're working on mobile and won't have easy access to a keyboard or input field while testing? Jahro Console offers flexibility and functionality that can help speed up your development. Now, if you're only working in the editor or a desktop environment, you might find other solutions to run cheat codes or functions at will. That said, the visual nature of the console makes it far easier to maintain lots of cheat codes when compared to text entry that needs to be spelled perfectly. And then in the mobile world, which I admittedly don't do much in, I can see Jahro Console as an important, even crucial tool in your toolbox. So if this sounds interesting, there's a link in the description below, or you can find the Jahro Console on the Unity Asset Store. Now, I know this video was a little bit different in the sense that it was a sponsored video on a paid asset, so I'd love some feedback. Give me a thumbs up if you like this content, thumbs down if you don't, or if you got a little bit more to say, leave me a comment below and let me know what you think about Jahro Console and these type of videos. And at the end of the day, what I really hope is that this was interesting, or better yet, useful for you and your project. And until next time, happy game designing.